everybody. This is Seth Shapiro. Ned couldn't be with us at the top. He's going to show up at the bottom. But we have a great conversation today. I'd like to introduce Will Traweek, who is going to speak to us about his solution, which solves for a bunch of pain points and things that we've talked about in the past as big opportunities in the space. Before we get to that, yeah, please, that's great. Everybody introduce yourselves in the chat. Say hello, add your LinkedIn, and Will, you can unmute and we'll get started in the meantime. We'll probably do about 25 minutes to a half hour of conversation between Will and I, and then we'll do 15 minutes or so of Q&A. So at any point you guys want to enter your questions, that'd be great, and I'll try and address them. Oh, hey, Ron, good to see you again. With that, let me introduce Will Traweek. Will, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what led you to blockchain?
Yeah, so I have a background in, well, first off, thank you for introducing me, Seth. Happy to be here. I have a background in software engineering, in particular leading product teams in fintech space, which is, has a natural transition to blockchain. NFTs really interested me. And so moving into that space, realized just how painful the experience was, though, for the everyday user. So I took a team of UI and UX experienced people, moved them into the wallet world, and we worked to produce a crypto wallet that has a heavy focus on ease of use and to help educate the everyman on how to use crypto and how to integrate with the crypto world.
Excellent. And the primary Zelus product is the wallet. That's what we're going to be talking about the most today, but that has serious applications for, among other things, proof of attendance NFTs. Yeah,
that's correct.
So I guess where should we start? Well, I guess I'll talk about this. We've talked about it in the past. One of the issues for new NFT products or NFT products for new audiences is that the walleting process and the onboarding process in MetaMask, which I'm sure is this product that most of you know, is pretty gnarly. It's really painful, and it can often consist of having to go to an exchange, and that could be Coinbase, it could be anything. Entering some sort of fiat relationship, buying Ethereum or something else, then taking it over into MetaMask, and then going to a site like OpenSea and exchanging it. It's complicated. It's really scary for people who are doing it for the first time. You can actually lose your money if you do it wrong, if you enter the wrong address. And so maybe, Will, I know that was a big focus for you guys. Why don't you talk about the Zelus Wallet and why that's so much better?
Yeah, so there's a few things that we had noticed that were major pain points for the everyday person. One is the fact that with MetaMask, you have a extended sign-up process. So when you're at an event and you want to claim something really quickly, you have to go through a 7 to 12 step process. Then you have to copy something that's called a wallet address and send that in or sign in with your wallet, etc. The problem with that is that the wallet address is something that most new people don't fully comprehend. It's a 42 character string of this gobbledygook, and it's not really human readable. It's barely human understandable, even for people in the tech space. And so that was a big pain point. The other one is that the sign-up process was such a pain. So we decided to take that down to just 2 clicks and an email. That's it. So you enter the wallet, you type in your email, you're done, you're integrated. Then we use that email as the integration point for everything there. Email is something that we've been using for 25 years now. It's human readable, human understandable. Everyone knows what their email is, so it's super duper easy to sign up for things, to integrate with the greater Web3 world. You just use that same address and identifier that you've been using for decades now.
And what is that process? So maybe if you're a major media company or you're somebody with a media product, maybe walk us through what the process would if you've got an event or some sort of virtual event or real event, could be a concert, could be something else. What's the process for offering an integration with you guys to your fan base?
Great question. So that's bipartite as well. One, we can integrate using Wallet Connect, which is a standard across the industry. MetaMask, Rainbow, all of the other major wallets out there use this exact same thing. So if you have an event that is already integrating with the Web3 world in that way, boom, we're already integratable. So we can be plugged in right then in there. We also have extra tools to help your developers. If you happen to be launching something, want something a little simpler to launch, great. We can put out that Wallet Connect integration for you. You can integrate it super seamlessly into your site. And then boom, the Zelus wallet is integrated. So your users can get that more seamless experience. Alternatively, we also have a consulting arm that has helped a variety of festivals and other in-person events set up and launch these POAPs where it's as simple as scanning a QR code.
Excellent. And let's talk a little bit about proof of attendance, NFTs and that process. So just as a general background, you guys have probably all seen example of events where there's a QR code and you can download the QR code and then later on potentially get a commemorative NFT, or often now the opportunity to attend events where the actual purchase of the entrance into the event is an NFT itself. But those things present well, let's maybe do the challenges around that first, and then we'll do the opportunities, Will. So one of the issues, right, is if there's a commemorative NFT or a proof of attendance NFT, but you have to be able to download a wallet and create an account, and that's tough. You've already got an issue, right?
So one of the stats that we actually use all the time is that what we've seen in this field space, and in particular with festivals and other in-person, like spur of the moment events, there's roughly a 2% conversion rate from people who actually want to go and get the NFT to actually picking it up. Now, again, most of these aren't particularly techie individuals, and I'm sure it might be higher for those who have already been through this experience many times. But for the average person, it's still a tough experience to go through. What we've seen in the festivals that we've launched at is we have about a 45% conversion rate. So it can help various partners integrate in a better way. So that helps explain a little bit about the difficulty of launching one of these. But moreover, we've been talking about some proof of attendance and mostly with the around in-person events. But I also want to touch on the fact that it's really about being part of a cultural moment. And so it doesn't have to necessarily be a festival or a stadium attendance or something like that. It could maybe be attending something online or proof of completing something. Like, we're just barely scratching the surface today of really what these things can show you.
And do you have are there any examples of, I mean, you can anonymize these, of best practices that you've seen in this space in terms of these kind of proof of attendance NFTs, or things that people should either do or not do?
Yeah, well, one of the things that you shouldn't do is if you have a local event or something like that, letting just anyone sign up via a link or something that gets spread, and that really kind of ruins the whole proof part of the proof of attendance, right? So choosing some mechanism by which you can verify that someone was there. Maybe it's having a passphrase or written QR code, something like that. Some sort of security mechanism is really good to have in place there. That's something that we've been doing through the consulting arm for a little while. Outside of that, you got to make it easy for people. You can't have something that's 13 steps to sign up for. So if you make it easy, the people want it, the people will come, people will sign up, they will claim this, and then you will be able to engage with them later down the line.
Awesome. And so what are some of the opportunities that you see around proof of attendance NFTs for brands or studios or others?
Couple things. One that we've seen that can work really well is for maybe festivals and stuff like for maybe Sundance, we'll take as an example, being able to show that you attended a certain movie, that you were there for this screening, then you can advertise to all of your friends, oh, I was there at the pre-screening way before this thing was popular. Or for a game, let's take, for example, proof of an achievement. People love achievement hunting in games. Now we have something that can digitally verify this fact. You can advertise to all of your friends. For various brands and things like that, there are a million different ways to be able to prove out that people did something. Oh, rewards programs are another great one that frequently get hit on.
Yeah, and you've got that ongoing communication channel potentially. I guess that's something about having their email in general. Does that give you the ability? Does that constitute an opt-in when somebody signs up for you? Do you kind of do ongoing communication with folks to their email outside of the wallet?
It can. It does depend on the particular drop itself, what the users are agreeing to there. But that is totally an option that we have that other wallets don't, where they just have your wallet address, for example. And obviously, it's opt-in for the end user. This is crypto, so privacy is of great importance to a lot of people.
Yeah. One of the other things that really stood out for me is that this is a cross-chain solution. So maybe just define that for people and then talk about how Zelus deals with multiple chains.
So I'm going to start off by talking about some of the problems in this space first, and then we're going to loop back into that. One of the biggest problems that a lot of brands have is when you look at a blockchain like Ethereum, it's using so much of it's a proof of work blockchain. And what this means for everybody in the audience is that you have to spend X amount of compute power to be able to verify a block and then put it on the blockchain. But the problem is that so many people are trying to contribute that there's an immense amount of power that goes into this thing. I think the stat is that Ethereum takes up as much electricity as the country of the Netherlands. And that's a big problem for a lot of the more eco-conscious brands and communities. So there are some blockchains that have gone in to try and solve this. Polygon, for example, which is where we're dropping a lot of our NFTs, is one of those, where minting an NFT actually takes less electricity and has less of a carbon footprint than sending a tweet, which people do every day without thinking about. Some other brands or some other chains, Avalanche, Phantom, others like that, we also have integrated with the wallet. And so if your brand has a specific one that it wants to mint on, great, we integrate with that, and it's all in the same place. The other part of that is that many people have different wallets for different chains. We want to integrate this so that your entire Web3 experience is in a single place.
Wow, that's awesome. So, oh, great. Phil, I'll get to that question in a second. That's excellent. But please, everybody, enter your questions, and we'll move to Q&A soon. Again, there's actually two different boxes. It's a little confusing on Zoom. There's a chat area, which is great. But then for this, if you could put them in the Q&A, that would be great. So for like a more intermediate advanced group, Will, that's really fascinating. So essentially all the any EVM compatible chain basically can work with your wallet flawlessly. So is there like a bridge behind the scenes, or are these all integrated now? What's been the experience with that?
So right now we have Polygon, Avalanche, and Ethereum built in. As you pointed out, those are all EVM chains. Those are the ones we're trying to integrate first. We'll have Binance Smart Chain. I think the update from the devs was next week, so that'll be integrated. We're working on Phantom as well right now. On top of that, we're also working on non-EVM chains as well. We're looking to integrate Solana and Bitcoin by end of year. So we're trying to encompass as much as possible as quickly as possible.
Excellent. We're starting to get some really great questions, so I'm just going to hit you with a few of these. So our friend Ron asks, can a proof of attendance NFT scale? In the Sundance example, can you add additional movies viewed to the initial NFT, or do they all require unique NFTs? Interesting question.
Great question. It would depend on how the brand wanted to do it, but the answer is both and. We can do either or. So we can have an NFT that shows your Sundance attendance, and then it can have various traits under that show off the various movies that you went to. And that's something that we can tack on ex post facto. Alternatively, we can do one per movie set. It would really just depend on how the partner wanted to integrate that, but both are viable options.
Cool. And I guess that's a decision you would make. Is that a decision, just out of curiosity, is that a decision you would have to make at the outset that it would be extensible, or could
from day zero, that would have to be built in?
That makes sense. Our friend Phil Lelyveld from USC asks, why is your proof of attendance better than a simple badge or token? Can you make a strong case for it? Can it be traded, which undermines its proof?
So that's a good question as well. That also depends on what the brand wants to do. There might be a really good use case for trading, being able to sell and stuff like that. And maybe this wouldn't be a great one for proof of attendance, but maybe for something that you get as a reward for having completed X achievement, where then it might have some intrinsic value you want to sell. Maybe it's a chance of VIP tickets next year to the same festival or what have you. Alternatively, there are some that we're dropping where no, it shouldn't be able to be traded because it actually wants to validate that you had done this or that thing and that you had actually been there. For example, showing up to a band's concert, if you want to be able to, right now, you can just buy a t-shirt from that band and you can later sell it on eBay or something like that. Someone can say they went to that concert, they have the original t-shirt, but you really don't know if they did that. That's the same sort of thing that we would make what we call soul bound, where you can't be traded, because we want to actually show that you were there. You didn't just buy it after the fact.
Interesting. One of the things that you talk about in your deck is human focused, not bots focused. I'm kind of curious, does that have to do, is that a UX feature? Does that have to go with sort of instructing the users, or is that more of a security issue?
So that goes back to what I touched on at the beginning with the wallet address. It's a 42 character string of just random gobbledygook. It's hexadecimal characters for the engineers in there, and it looks terrible. It's not human readable. It's not human understandable. There is no way you could sit on the phone with someone and rattle off what your wallet address is. It would take you forever. We want to focus on humans, so we try and take something that people already know, use, understand. Email is the way to go there.
Cool. One question that's really popular generally this week is just sort of standard best practices for NFTs or wallet management. If you're somebody that's kind of new to the space, do you have any kind of guidelines to help people feel more secure and safer generally?
So some of that we touch on our website in particular, and we also touch on in the app as well a little bit. One is that it's a non-custodial wallet. So what that means is that we don't hold on to your funds. You do. It's all secured behind biometric authentication, your face, your fingerprint, however your phone currently does that, will secure your funds, your NFTs, et cetera, and so forth. We don't actually have access to trade on your behalf. So you know that all of your funds are secure and we can't touch them, a hacker can't touch them, et cetera, and so forth. On top of that, we've added in a ton of tooltips and specialty guidelines, help sections, et cetera, to try and help as many users as possible feel comfortable with what they're doing in app and what is typically a foreign crypto experience.
Awesome. Another one of the general questions that's been coming up a lot this week has to do with movement, I think. So in terms of sort of the rise of OpenSea, there's questions about when can you, so if somebody buys an NFT or receives an NFT, and I think Phil or somebody else was sort of getting at this too, how portable are these? Once you have it, can you move it to somewhere else? Can you sell it? When can you do that? When can't you do that, et cetera?
Again, depends on the festival. There are some that aren't tradable, some that are tradable, and that's something that will be relayed to you when you claim all of that, and should be fairly obvious and is explained to you in app. That there are just some things where, like, we want to prove that you were there, so we can't trade it. On the other hand, the core of the wallet is actually based on your seed phrase, and you can import that to another wallet if you so desire. You can import other wallets into Zelus as well, if that's what you want to do. So it is portable to a degree, and you can carry it with you into the future.
The biometric angle is pretty new, and it seems like kind of a obvious competitive advantage. So you're using the actual face recognition or fingerprint recognition on the phone to access the private key, or
that's correct. And part of the reason we can do that is because the keys are held on your device. And so that is a secure method of actually going about this.
Well, yeah, another really interesting thing that you mentioned that is a definite security enhancement potentially is that your solution's non-custodial. So to translate that again, that means that actually you, as the owner of the NFT, are in direct possession of the item yourself. A custodial wallet, if you think of a custodian generally, would be somebody else that holds it. So for example, generally centralized exchanges are custodial. They're holding your tokens for you. And therefore, if they get hacked, your stuff is in their possession and they can lose it. And that, I think that happened recently with, I don't remember which major NFT exchange, but they got hacked because they were custodial and they were holding a bunch of NFTs and they lost them, and they may make good to the customers, but they may not. You want to talk a little bit more, sort of break down for people why that non-custodial situation is an advantage?
Yes, and there's even a further breakdown there as well. There was a recent controversy about an exchange that had listed users as custodial exchange, most importantly, that listed users' assets as a liability on their balance sheet. So what that means is that in the event they go into bankruptcy or something like that, they're just going to sell off your crypto first to pay off their debtors. Your assets really aren't your assets in that case. Whereas with a Zelus wallet, we can't touch your assets. They're yours to keep forever. You paid for them. You should be able to hold on to them. And so that's not something that we could even attempt to do. On top of that, as Seth pointed out, there's single point of failure risk with some of these custodianships, where all of a sudden one person gets hacked, that is the company, and then anyone's crypto is up for grabs there. And that could be cryptocurrency, that could be NFTs, it could be any one of a number of valuable assets. What we'll do is, well, first off, we don't even have your keys. So if someone breaks into our servers, there's not a single thing they can do about it.
Interesting. Very cool. Another thing that sounded really interesting about Zelus is in high res. You actually are able to display items in a more graphically complex manner. Can you talk about that?
So we started off with an NFT focus. And one of the things that I really didn't like about most of the wallet offerings there is that you're going to go out and spend a lot of money on what is a really good NFT in the art as an NFT case. And you should be able to see that in its full glory. You want to be able to zoom in, see the detail. Maybe it's a painting of a forest, right? You should be able to see the trees, what the artist had really intended the art to be. Our wallet allows you to pinch and zoom into that. Wow. It lets you, if it's a music NFT, it plays like a native music player. If you have a video NFT, you should be able to scrub, play that. The content type should determine the experience that a user has, not just the fact that it's an NFT. And in some other wallets, they have the same sort of de facto interface in every single case. And it doesn't let the user really see what the artist had intended or put together in its full glory.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially as assets get more sophisticated. Eventually, video assets clearly are coming, high-res files. So that sounds really smart. Again, any of your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat box. We'll be going back to Q&A in just a few minutes. You had a phrase, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you had a phrase in the deck, Will, that really interested me, and I wanted to hear your vision on this. You say wallets are the on-ramp to everything Web3. What do you mean by that?
So the interesting thing about Web3 is that you actually have one account for everything. So people have sort of got this experience. If you've ever seen the sign in with Google or sign in with Facebook or something like that, it's where you have one account and it lets you access a bunch of different things. With the Web3 world and where the internet's going now, your wallet is your key to everything. So you obviously want that to be a safe and secure and user-friendly home for everything that you'll do on the internet. You have one account now that you access everything with. And that's what that phrase means.
Very cool. Are there competitive, or are there any creative, I mean, I can't think of any, but are there any, let me put it another way. So every chain right now, major chain obviously has its own wallets that are developed by third parties. And if you're working in an environment like Ethereum or Polygon, there are a whole bunch of open source wallets that you can go out and skin and reskin. I mean, it kind of makes sense that eventually you would want all of your stuff to be in one place. Are there technical barriers to that, or sort of business, political opportunity limitations to that? Or like, have you encountered that, or is it just, purely code that has to be built?
Yeah, it's almost strictly a technical limitation. The way that blockchains are implemented varies quite drastically between them, and so that's a great difficulty to overcome when you are creating a cross-chain wallet. And part of the reason that we're able to overcome that, and maybe it's a little bit more difficult for others, is the fact that we had come into this with that intention from day one. Think of it a lot like building a house. It's really easy to build a house to the plans that the architect had created, and it's really, really difficult to renovate it and change stuff. So by the time you've knocked out a wall and you've renovated it once, knocking down that wall again and doing it again is more difficult. By the time you come out with 8 or 9 or 10 iterations of the same product, as is the nature of every single piece of software, you now are looking and you smash that wall down again. You're like, oh no, where does this wire go? And that makes it really difficult to try and improve upon a piece that already exists. We came in with day one with a multi-chain focus. And quite frankly, the landscape was such that if we had started even 2 months earlier, I don't think that would have been in mind. It's only been very recent that this multi-chain focus has been really, really big.
Wow, that's really interesting. You do kind of have this experience with great tech companies where the more you get to know principals at them, or you get to know their inner workings, as you know, consulting with them or working with their business processes, you realize just how important the long range thinking became to how they who won in a competitive field of 7 a lot of times is determined by how early they saw where the world was going, because the decisions you make today, you know, kind of exponentially limit or open up the roads you can go to in the future. And so you're saying even if you had started 2 months earlier, there are things that you couldn't have done that would have affected your roadmap.
That's exactly it. And I think the reason for, one of the bigger reasons for that is that NFTs were somewhat in their infancy still, and we're still only scratching the surface of really what the possibilities are there. And same with the various blockchains. We've gone maybe 2% of the way into what it really is. Think the internet in 1995. We barely have blog sites as an equivalent right now. And there's so much more to delve into and so much more to discover. And I think we've picked the right direction to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think I was on the first one of these with Ned, and I think one of the things that I was trying to convey, and I'm going to ask you to do the same thing, because I think it's really helpful to people in terms of understanding where NFTs are and how nascent this is. I was just talking about how in the early conversations about fungible tokens, non-fungible was sort of a theoretical idea. Now it's found its application, but maybe define that, because I think a lot of people are still a little confused about what non-fungible tokens actually means. Not the easiest phrase in the world.
Sure. So we'll start with fungible tokens, because I think it's easier to explain what one is and then say what it's not. So a fungible token is like $1. I can exchange my dollar for your dollar, and even though the serial numbers are different, they have the exact same value, and for all intents and purposes are effectively the exact same thing. A non-fungible token is like a painting. I hang it on my wall, and even though you might have another 4x6 painting on your wall, they're not the exact same thing, and they have very different values. Now we've also gotten into the idea of semi-fungible tokens. Think of these as prints. If I have a photographer that takes a really famous photo, he might make 100 iterations of that, and I might have the first iteration, you might have the 100th iteration, but there's a limit to how many of them there are, and they're not exactly transferable because the first iteration does still hold some primacy, but there's an interaction there as well.
Yeah, and fungible kind of is exchangeable. So if I give Will one $20 bill and then he's going to return it, I don't expect the same $20 bill. Money's fungible. Every $20 node is essentially exactly equivalent to any other, as opposed to non-fungible things which have some sort of unique identifier. We've got, and an NFT is more like is in that model. So we've got 2 more great questions. One from Ron: as a non-custodial holding, how are NFTs recoverable, if they are, if the device holding the keys is lost, damage? Is it the single point of failure simply transferred to the client versus a back end?
So it's a great question. We've done The answer is in part, but we've done a lot of things to really help mitigate that. One, we have a recovery phrase. So you can write down this 12-word phrase that effectively works as like a one-time password or something like that you can use to restore it on a new device. And secondarily, we have backups through iCloud, and I'm fuzzing on the Android equivalent, but so there are ways that we have to back it up where if your device gets destroyed or lost or what have you, getting another device will just import the exact same thing and you'll be good to go.
Great. Phil asks, does the one wallet concept mean that you can only have one identity in Web3? Many people like separate identities for business and personal, but this sounds like at least some identifying info must be consistent across identities to access the wallet.
Right now, the answer is yes, there is a single identity, although you can sign out and then sign back into another as it currently stands. That is something that we've had a lot of questions about recently and that we could implement and probably will in the future, allowing people to swap between various identities.
Yeah, I mean, and there's the sort of the MetaMask analog of that, where you have by default multiple addresses within the same wallet very easily. So I guess you could have a personal one and you could have a business one and a personal one within the same wallet. Yeah.
We would actually do it slightly differently with a MetaMask implementation. It is possible for people to figure out if they know one of your addresses. There's a math operation you can do to figure out the others. And so some people don't love that privacy trade-off that exists there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So one obvious question, which we sort of have to get into right now, since we're done about the market generally in NFTs, and you're obviously a successful guy running a startup in the space, is what do you make of, the recent market? Obviously, when crypto started, it was an uncorrelated asset, and maybe Bitcoin was going to trade like gold, which meant that it would be, a very different thing from what it is now, where crypto has correlated really strongly with the NASDAQ, which is down, everything's down. Once again, we're back to an environment where the popular press is, this is a sham, this is a scam. But you can also say that most successful companies started in moments like this, where I think Microsoft, Facebook, I don't remember if it was Google or Amazon, they all sort of started in recessions and stuff. So what's your perspective on where we are in the market?
Couple things. One, you don't care about turbulence in the atmosphere when you're on a rocket ship. And that, yes, it might throw you a little bit off trajectory, but the second you leave the atmosphere, that's an easy course correction and you're on your way to the moon. Two, yes, there are some companies that will probably go down. Luna is one that we've just seen recently, but a lot of the winners will be picked here, and it'll be an interesting few years as we see who those people are.
Yeah, like the analogy I have from Web 1 is you had just as much sort of popular culture volatility and maybe not quite as much economic volatility, but a lot. And for all the companies that failed, without that sort of compost and excitement and money coming into the marketplace, you wouldn't have had Google, you wouldn't have had Amazon. And so it's really hard to say, in the early, to your analogy, which I agree with, if we're in 95, 96, 97 now, Facebook doesn't exist. Google isn't, I don't remember if it exists, or if it was a search engine. They certainly weren't doing ads. So, these companies, we are going to see these titanic new developments come out of Web3, but it's just too early to say. So it's turbulent, but it's also exciting, right?
Actually, to your point on the 1995, if you look at the adoption curves of the internet in terms of number of users and the adoption of crypto, you can look over the last 4 years and it's almost exactly what 91 through 95 was of the internet. So if you take that comparison, spot on.
Great. Yep, I agree. Now, having said that, as an entrepreneur or an investor or a media person, what do you do with that information? Suppose you want to get involved in this space, but you don't want to get involved in a way that's going to, leave you with egg on your face. What are your general recommendations?
Well, we just had a pretty big drawdown, so I guess you can have a 60% and then follow it with another one, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Also, if you were in 1995 and you interacted with the internet and you knew your way around it, you were better off for it still, even in 2000 when everything went down, and even better off for that in 2005 when everything was sort of back up. So getting into this space now cannot hurt you. It can only help you. And the earlier you get in, the more experience you'll have down the line, and the better off everyone will be in that world.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess one potential thing to do is to, whatever your field of expertise is, apply that to this companies that are moving in your space. I mean, I think, Ron's here. I mean, a lot of us were huge Apple fans at a time where that wasn't popular. And, there was the Gil Amelio era. And there was certainly a period during that thing where it wasn't clear what was going to happen. And the iPod happened and a couple other things happened. And, the company became the #1 market cap company in the world. So, I think probably there are some measures of how to tell what's good from what's bad. I mean, as somebody that deals with a lot of these chains, a lot of these companies, that's familiar with Luna, that's a fintech guy originally. Any sense of what people should and shouldn't look for in potential partners in the blockchain?
I think one thing to look for is there's a couple of key players that are here to stay. Ethereum is one of those, and I heavily believe in that. Some of these L2s, they're also here to stay, and in particular, it's because of the adoption they've already had and the way that they're growing. The way I see it, and we've said this a couple different times, Ethereum is sort of the rails of the new internet, if you will. Polygon and Avalanche and all those are built on top of it. So know that I'm talking about them still here when I'm referring to Ethereum. But it would sort of be like buying into that, and the greater ecosystem as a whole would sort of be like buying the fiber optic pipeline between two major cities in the US way back when. You'd love to have a portion of that today. And so getting plugged into that ecosystem and maybe even owning a share of it is something that will be extremely valuable down the line as NFTs and blockchain continue to grow.
Awesome. And so we're going to go to Cecily's question and close out. But before we do that, maybe it's helpful to define that to people because it's not intuitive. So maybe we'll talk about L2s a little bit. So when Bitcoin came out, was originally posited in the Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper in 2008, and propagated and Bitcoin became known as a store of value. That was sort of the first major currency. The second one being Ethereum was sort of a very different model. Maybe explain what Ethereum actually does to people, for people, or what the thesis was.
So Ethereum is smart contracts is effectively the basis of that. And what that means is that you can have pieces of code that work effectively as, in its smallest possible form, escrow agents that allow you to conduct transactions. But what that can do when elevated another step and you tack on then fungible tokens, NFTs, semi-fungible tokens, and all of that, you end up getting this world where you effectively have a compute infrastructure for a new type of internet, where now every transaction can be conducted in a decentralized way. It almost flips the entire concept of the internet up on its head, where traditionally you had servers feeding stuff to you. I go to Google with this piece of information and they give stuff to me and feedback stuff to me. And then Web 2.0 came along a little bit where it's like, okay, well, maybe I can contribute in feeding some of that information to the server that then gets fed to other people. So now you have small interactions with Facebook, Twitter, what have you, where I can submit a tweet and then it gets distributed to thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people. With Web3, every single transaction is entirely participatory. And so now I am creating this piece of information and it's being distributed to everyone. Blockchain helps you do that. And it's only really possible through Ethereum and some of these other smart contract layers that came out later down the line. Bitcoin is really strictly usable as a currency or a store of value. couple caveats to that, but for the most part, not worth talking about right now.
Awesome. And then the other chains that we're talking about, the layer 2s that you referred to. So these are variations of Ethereum, basically, that are built on the source code of Ethereum, but solve for or change different elements of Ethereum. And that's Polygon, Phantom, Avalanche. Who else would you put in that list?
Optimism and Arbitrum are two others that I would probably mention there. The key there is that they all solve for different specific problems. Some of them have a little bit of overlap, but for the most part, they solve. Ethereum is really secure. It's also really, really, really slow. And that can be a problem, that it's expensive to use and so on and so forth. These other chains all solve for that by allowing more transactions, cheaper costs. So they're better for applications. Something like a decentralized Twitter wouldn't be put on Ethereum. Polygon or Avalanche would be perfect. Something like your bank, Ethereum might be better. It's a little bit more secure. And so now it opens up the opportunity for specialization across chains, which again goes to the multi-chain concept that we have, where if I'm a video game developer, don't want to be on Ethereum, want to be on something else. And one wallet to interact with all of these allows you to use that same account, that same familiar interface across the variety of different aspects and opportunities that the world of blockchain has to offer.
Excellent. Really well said. Okay. Ned, I'm going to go to Cecily for the last question, and then I'm going to throw it back to you because I think we're 4 minutes out. But this has been fantastic, Will. Really enjoyed it. I think everybody learned a lot. You want to give folks, or maybe put in the chat, and then put in the chat the contact information for you, and if people want to reach out.
Yeah, so best way to reach out, probably Zelus has a million different social handles. Any one of those will be great to reach out to me. Also by email if you want, and I can drop that in the chat as well here.
Great,
yep.
Perfect. And I'll put mine in the chat as well. So let's go to the last question from Cecily. Once a wallet is imported into Zelus, does that wallet address and its contents live in both places, i.e. Coinbase and Zelus simultaneously?
That's correct. So what we can do, a wallet is, for the most part, a way to see what assets are on the blockchain, and then an interface to be able to interact with that. But the assets aren't necessarily stored in that ecosystem. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But when you import your wallet into Zelus, we duplicate a lot of that stuff so that you can interact with it both in the old place where it was and in the new place where in Zelus. So you'll have it in both places. So you get the best of both worlds.
Awesome. Thank you everybody for joining. I think that wraps up for today, and especially thank you, Will. I'll turn it back over to you, Ned.
Thanks, Seth. Thanks, Will. Really appreciate you coming on the show today and updating us on what's going on in your worlds. And appreciate everybody in the audience today who had great questions and comments throughout the show. So we'll see you at the next Let's Do Lunch, folks. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Will.
Thanks so much.
Bye, Ned.